Nixon having to resign from office is that his vice president, Gerald Ford, became president, and by appointment, not by Democratic vote, you had Nelson Rockefeller become vice president. You remember that, Tom?
Yeah.
Well, guess who Nelson Rockefeller was? He was the very top of the Rockefeller cartel. He was the big guy. This was the boss man willing to put himself into power as president. And there was an attempt made on Gerald Ford's life, which would have, and it made him very sick. It was an illness type of attack. And if Ford had been taken out, then Nelson Rockefeller would have become president of the United States, and there would have been a very, very different situation because he would have created nuclear war. So, among many other things. Now, what ended up happening was Nelson Rockefeller was assassinated by the opposition forces. He was never able to become president, and the whole plan fell apart. There were multiple plans. They were very actively planning on having nuclear war. That was not just a joke. They really did want to have this happen. It never happened. And as we know, there's any number of things you can find on the internet of various whistleblower testimonies saying that you have UFOs that are knocking out the capabilities of nuclear missiles. So,
yeah, I've always heard that.
Yeah, so let's just keep really clear on the fact that there are bad things that happen, but it's never going to go over the top. And if you're reading stuff that's prognosticating something over the top, it would be a really good idea to keep your perspective in mind and remember that if you listen to Peter David Beater from the 70s, and then you actually think about the way that history unfolded, what he's saying, based on very real insider stuff, is vastly, vastly more dire than what actually ended up happening. And that's what always happens. People have been talking about FEMA camps ever since, the early 1990s or earlier.
Yeah.
And it's never happened. The closest you ever got to that, as I've said before, was the Superdome fiasco with Hurricane Katrina, where they said to everybody, hey, go to the Superdome, you'll be safe there, and then they basically locked them in from the outside and let everybody just kind of waste away in there.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was a plan. I mean, those were built to be concentration camps. You keep everybody in there, and ultimately, if you want to kill everybody off, you just don't open the doors. But now that they've done that even one time, nobody's ever going to go into a Superdome again.
Ever.
Ever. So the plans keep getting exposed, and again, let me just finish out my little thought about BRIC, because I didn't actually finish what I was saying. One of the key countries in there that can go by, and you're just like, oh, okay, but then you don't even think about it, is India. Okay, but I've found an incredible treasure trove of new information. If you go to this website, indiadaily.com, and then you read their technology section, there's a whole section called technology. There's a link you can click on that basically brings up all the technology articles that they've been publishing since 2004. I went through there and it was exhausting because, 3 out of 4 articles, if not more, are all disclosure. It's straight ahead, officially government-sanctioned disclosure of UFO stuff, because what happened is that when China became a nuclear power, apparently, whatever the rules are with these ETs, when you become a nuclear power, you get clued in on what's going on. You get visits from ETs. They let you know the deal. And that makes sense. So what's happened is India has kind of snuck into the game and is doing more on an official level to disclose this truth than like anybody. They've got technology, they've got free energy, they've got anti-gravity. They're basically telling you how it works. They're talking about this UFO activity that's happening in Karachi on the border with Pakistan and the border with China. That they're talking about settlements that have been made where they've completely changed the terrain of certain areas in order to develop all this infrastructure because people are seeing UFOs coming and going on a daily basis out of these places. And what ultimately it led to was that a very short time after the November 27th date, there was an official correspondence dinner at the White House, and the reason why most people know about this dinner is because this is where the so-called White House party crashers showed up. Tariq and Michelle Salahi, right? The Salahi.
Right.
And they weren't invited. They weren't on the guest list. But let's not forget that that same dinner was the dinner where you have the Indian Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh, speaking with Obama. And they make some very, very, very strong quotes in that talk that directly suggest that they know that disclosure is coming and that they're about to do it. If you go back and read India Daily and you read the disclosure articles, and again, this is all going to be in Disclosure Endgame, you see India actually wrestling with the idea of being the ones to break the disclosure to the world, even though they've been told, and they tell you right in these articles, that if they do this, that they will be denied access to their stand in like the G20 or the G8 countries or whatever it is, the United Nations, that they would basically have their charter revoked. They would be betrayed. But they're weighing it out. They're still saying, should we do this? And yet what they're actually doing is in this technology section of India Daily, they're giving it to you over and over and over again. I mean, it was so much work for me just to go through all those articles and then read them and then copy off the data into my own files to eventually use it in the future. I could literally do a whole book of just compiling India's articles and making a narrative out of it. Very, very advanced disclosure. I mean, it's like, my God, you know, I've never seen this stuff anywhere else. And I'm just kind of blown away that nobody in the UFO community has been talking about this yet. And so you have to understand all these people that are skeptical and are saying, oh, you know, there's no disclosure and everything's going to stay the way it is. I mean, open your eyes. If you haven't seen what they're doing with this television show V and the timelines of when that show came out, I mean, we were told by the Exopolitics that there was there was a big UN meeting in 2008 in February where basically the announcement, it was might have been 2007. It was 2007 or 2008 where there was a major meeting that was announced where they would like put forward the disclosure process and kick it into high gear. And I believe it was 2008. And then from that time forward, there's been much more disclosure, much more leaking of information. And if you take that time as like the origin point when these other factions that are trying to stop disclosure, when they said, okay, we get it, you know, this is going to be a real problem. One of the things that was announced in this February 2008 meeting was that one of the forms disclosure would take when it finally happened is that you'd have UFOs parked over major cities around the world. So the timeline is just about right. I know from working in Hollywood that if you get an idea for a film, it takes about a year to be able to get it fully executed. So if February 2008 was when they first heard that this might be happening, the television show V came out in late 2009. So they had more than enough time. They also had more than enough time to work in the Obama administration once Obama was seen to have won the election as of as of November 2008 is when they knew. Well, you didn't have V come out until November 2009, so you still had a year to have rewritten the script around the idea that Obama was now the president before you actually shot it and before you did post-production and actually got to the point that it could be aired on television. And, of course, by putting out a week at a time, you have the time to do more post-production as the weeks go by. And they only did a few episodes, and then the rest of them are going to be coming out as of March. But this television show was watched by like 17 million people. It was extremely popular. They put a huge marketing budget into it. And it comes out so directly attacking the Obama administration that even the White House itself had to field questions to this effect from the press correspondents. It was talked about by Bill O'Reilly on Fox News. There were multiple articles written about how perfectly this show seems to fit into the right-wingers' agenda, as if a direct correlation being made between Obama and these so-called visitors, who we know from watching the show in the 80s ultimately end up being reptilian, and they're basically here to eat everybody. But they even tie in like the swine flu vaccine as being, all this stuff that's really current. and they want to blame everything on Obama. And so if you look at this, it's a very, very advanced psyops whose purpose is to make people completely xenophobic and paranoid so that when Obama makes this official announcement, that everybody thinks that he's actually working with some sort of negative group who's reptilian in nature and basically is going to try to kill everybody. So this is a very, very strong effort. It's a very strong effort being made to stage manage the disclosure. You were going to say something.
I just said, oh man, it's amazing. It's just amazing all this, how this all operates.
Yeah, that show is being used as a weapon, and it's only one of a series of them, but it's one of the most high-profile and easy-to-observe ones, especially because you can watch all the episodes for free on Hulu. So it's right out there, and I've got a transcript of what they actually are saying, the dialogue between the characters. And again, this is part of what was going to be in the conclusion of Disclosure Endgame. But we're really dealing with a situation where this is going to happen. The plans are being made for it very actively. It's not something you're going to sit around and be like, crap, David said this was going to happen, and nothing has happened. It's the same old, same old, same old. That's not the case. You go look at India today. You look at the technology section. You realize that they're part of the BRIC now. They're part of this alliance with Russia, India, China, and Brazil. And they're out there making this disclosure happen. The Prime Minister of India and Obama are like doing these very, very edgy comments about disclosure right in front of the public. You can watch the video. It's all going to be in the conclusion. So this stuff is for real. And once we have disclosure, we're going to have gone through some really, really crazy difficulties to get there. I do acknowledge that. But it's not going to be the end of the world. It's just going to be a change. And in the aftermath... Go ahead.
Let me just interrupt you for a sec. You really think that there's... basically, the shit's going to hit the fan first before there's any disclosure?
Yeah.
It's going to be like a mega... disaster or whatever. Disaster financially, earth changes, whatever.
A lot of the corporations that are the most corrupt and the most heinous are going to be really, really kicked in the balls. There's no question. Mm-hmm. They are going to be vomiting all over the place. They're going to be screaming and crying, and they're going to use the mainstream media outlets to go through all sorts of contortions. There probably will also be more of the kind of Haiti stuff. I don't think they'll do it in the U.S., as I said before, because it's too much of a teachable moment for Obama. Mm-hmm. But I do think that we have not seen the end of the thrashing of the tail of the dragon here. But again, it's going to be a leap of faith. It's going to be, do you trust enough in the inherent goodness of the universe and your own protection that if it appears that at one moment in time that whatever assets you have are now worthless, do you have the trust to see that that's not going to be the way it will continue to be? If you appear to see the fulfillment of this New World Order or Illuminati plan, if you think that's what you're seeing, because things get so crazy and you say, oh my God, they're going to do it, they're going to be responsible for it, let's please bear in mind, these guys have got their fists so firmly clenched around the conspiracy media that just about everything you're reading in the conspiracy media is propaganda. And that propaganda is going to sound like the stuff you want to read. It's going to be angry, it's going to be vindictive, it's going to hate on Obama, it's going to hate on the Illuminati, it's going to hate on the New World Order. They write it that way on purpose. Because what they're trying to do is they're telling you the stuff you want to hear while secretly inserting the poison pill that's intended to stave off any resistance that would happen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to get you off track. So they're going to want you, whether you read conspiracy media or mainstream media, when this thing happens, the conspiracy media is going to spin it as if it is, Obama is finishing his diabolical plans, and the Illuminati are finishing their diabolical plans, and they're going to spin this thing as if it's this terrible, horrible thing. I, honest to God, do not know how soon it's coming. Part of why I'm talking about it on this show is that if it happens sooner rather than later, that we'll have a document here where I've said everything I needed to say before it happens. But it could be March, it could be later in the year, it might not even be this year, but it's probably likely that it will be. Mm-hmm. So again, this is not a drill.